Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first virtual State Senate Forum conducted by the Greater Burlington Partnership's Government Relations Committee. I'm Brian Bross. I'm chair of the committee and Vice President Klingner & Associates, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Rachel Lynn Dean is our timekeeper, and she will flash a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left and a red card when time is up. We have two candidates, two Republican candidates with us this evening, Tim Goodwin and Matt Rinker. And we want to express our gratitude to each of these public servants for their interest in representing our communities in Des Moines County, or in Des Moines actually. And it is a challenging role for public service, and we really appreciate it. This forum will consist of rounds of questions asked by the moderator, myself, to which candidates will have varying times to respond. The order of a response will be rotated so that each candidate has the opportunity to be the first to answer a question. Candidates have not seen these questions in advance. And I do ask that candidates observe the signals from our timekeeper and stop your response when the time has expired in fairness to the other candidate. Each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 2-minute opening statement highlighting his reason for running for office. At the conclusion of this forum, each candidate will also have a 2-minute closing statement. And so we'll begin now with the opening statements. And for those that are not participating, please mute your mic so we can have a good, clear audio here. So we'll start with Tim Goodwin. He's the first in alphabetical order. Mr. Goodwin, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking the Greater Burlington Partnership for hosting this forum. I participated in a similar forum in 2018 when I ran for the Iowa House, and it was a positive experience. I also want to thank my wife and 3 kids for allowing me to pursue the state Senate, a position that I'm passionate about. I know if elected, it will take time away from my family, but I understand the demands of serving, and I look forward to representing Southeast Iowa, a place where I was born and raised, and a place that I call home today. In early February, I received a phone call from our United States Senator Joni Ernst asking me to run for the Iowa Senate. During our initial phone call, she expressed her support for my campaign and opened up a line of communication straight to Washington, D.C. We continue to stay in touch, talking about the issues that Iowans face, and now more than ever, we know how important that is. Having listened to many small business owners in Southeast Iowa during this pandemic, I know they are hurting and looking for guidance and leadership during this most difficult time. Small business owners are the backbone of our communities and need our help. I have already begun working on their behalf, having discussions with leadership in Des Moines to help provide clarity and answers to their questions. I know there are no quick solutions, and we should legislate with the best interest of Iowans and their recovery in mind over the next several years. I want to provide a voice for Southeast Iowa, an often forgotten corner of the state, so our residents can begin to feel a sense of normalcy and their fears can be kept to an absolute minimum. Having been a teacher and school administrator for 15 years has afforded me the understanding of what our educators and students will need to be successful in the next 6 to 12 months and beyond. It will be important for Southeast Iowans to have an elected official that has an ear of key decision makers as we move forward. As you can see, Iowans will be faced with many challenges over the next 4 years, and I am willing to take those challenges head on for you. I am asking for your vote in the June 2nd primary election, and I look forward to being your candidate of choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. We will now move to Matt Rinker. Matt?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the partnership to having us, especially in this virtual forum. These are not normal times, and it takes abnormal circumstances in order to be able to show what we're capable of, especially as a community. So my name is Matthew Rinker. I'm running for the Iowa Senate District 44. I was, just like Tim, was approached last year by our current sitting state senator, Tom Green, and asked if I would give the Iowa Senate consideration. After meeting with Des Moines leadership and speaking to several local and local county and state Republicans, I decided to pursue the opportunity and to run for the Iowa State Senate. A little bit about myself. So I'm from Burlington, Iowa, born and raised. I lived in the same home until the day I left for the U.S. military. I spent 5 years active duty in the Navy, where I was deployed to California and then deployed to Iraq. Did a tour in Greece where I met my wife, and then we moved back to Iowa. Since coming back to Iowa, I have kind of thrown myself into the mix. Started school at Western Illinois University, where I studied public policy and economics, and then came back to Burlington and started a small business. We've had a tremendous amount of success. In that time, my wife and I have given birth to and raised 4 wonderful children. The oldest is 8, and then the youngest is 2. Also in that time, I've been very actively involved in the community. I sit on the Burlington Education Foundation. I am the current Rotary Club president, and I'm a sitting Burlington City Councilman. And those experiences have afforded me the opportunity to understand numerous different perspectives. Like I said before, these are not normal times. Over the last 8 weeks, I have been on conference calls with the White House. Sorry, I didn't see you, Rachel, just for the record, because I can only see Brian.
Apologize for that. Maybe I should mute. Thank you, Matt. We will move on to our first question, and Matt, this will come to you first. The first question is, how will you support the expansion and updates of career and technical education systems statewide, especially with the new and updated requirements from the federal Perkins program?
Okay, so bear with me 1 minute here. I need to figure out how to get Rachel up here.
Your upper right, there's a grid view. Did you catch it there?
Yeah, and it's got all of the attendees, but Rachel's all the way to the farthest right, so I had to get her up there so I could make sure that I'm staying within time. I see you, Rachel. All right, could you please repeat the question?
Sure. How will you support the expansion and updates of career and technical education systems statewide, especially with the new and updated requirements from the federal Perkins program?
Okay. So anytime we are promoting technical education programs, we need to focus on the availability of those programs, especially to rural areas in Iowa. Right now, Iowa ranks 9th in the nation in terms of education, 7th with Regency schools and post-education, and then 13th in the nation in terms of K through 12. Right now, as a state, education is the second largest funding pot. However, and we need to maintain that. We need to also make sure that we are prioritizing our education funding dollars and allocating them to the correct pots that they need to be in. Right now, we subsidize tuition for Regency schools, that'd be University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and the University of Northern Iowa at a higher rate than we do any other education program, post-secondary education program in the state of Iowa. We then fund private education or private universities at a higher rate than we fund community colleges. One of the things that I think that we need to heavily focus on is reprioritizing those dollars to community colleges so that we can make technical education programs better available to the rural areas and to the people who need to get back into the workforce.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rinker. Mr. Goodwin, I'll repeat the question. How will you support the expansion and updates of career and technical education systems statewide, especially with the new and updated requirements from the federal Perkins program?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think the first key to supporting it is adequately funding things. A lot of times in Iowa, and being a former educator, I saw a lot of unfunded mandates that came across the education side, and you as a former school board president, I think you're probably well aware of a lot of those things as well. And so adequately supporting those and funding those is probably the first step. I know when I talk with business leaders here in the community, our workforce shortage is a problem. You know, when the economy was going good before this pandemic, and our unemployment numbers were at a record low, when I was talking to these business owners, they kept talking about a workforce shortage. And so I think having that private to public partnership with our schools, our private businesses, promoting the CT programs, making sure not only are we funding it, but they also have those programs in the school and teachers teaching it that can do that well, as well as, like I said, the funding.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Let's go on to the next question for you. We'll start with you, Mr. Goodwin. How do you see Future Ready Iowa sustaining into a long-term program?
Well, you know, I was a part of that in 2018 when I ran. I remember when the governor came down to Burlington and had a forum, and there were a lot of people there, and we were in the early stages of that, those task forces, I guess, and trying to get ideas from local Iowans. And so, I think unfortunately that, as well as some of the other programs, are kind of going to be on the back burner a little bit, to be honest with you, with the dealing of the coronavirus and stuff. I think that a big part of that is the broadband, the expansion of broadband. I know that was one of the things that came out of our meeting, and making sure that, we have a lot of rural Iowans and a lot of people that are wanting to work from home, and being able to support that with the broadband expansion is certainly going to make that much more accessible for people to do that. And then that has that trickle down effect, taking care of maybe some child care concerns as well. And so getting Iowa into the 21st century has been a challenge, but it's something that we need to continue to build on, even maybe if the dollars and cents aren't right there right now.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Mr. Rinker, I'll repeat the question. How do you see Future Ready Iowa sustaining into a long-term program?
I kind of feel like it's the same question that we had the first time around. So Iowa's expected to add about 612,000 new jobs over the course of the next 10 years. What that's going to do to our economy is it's going to allow us the ability to expand. Tim's right. There is going to come a point where, especially with the current situation, that we're going to have to reprioritize dollars. We need to, however, ensure that those dollars are still available. The Future Ready Iowa program connects, especially rural parts of Iowa, but it connects the people in those areas to the education programs that allow them to get trained or retrained so that they can stay employed. At some point, this suppression or this current normal is going to go away. This crisis will end, and we need to make sure that Iowans and Iowa's workforce are ready to grow and to take on the challenges so that we can get back to our pre-COVID-19 rates of unemployment and economic prosperity.
Thank you, Matt. We'll jump to the third question, and we'll go with you again here on this one, Matt. Schools across Iowa are experiencing a shortage of teachers, as well as other professionals across industries. How can Iowa better position itself to educate, recruit, and retain professionals in high-demand jobs?
Well, I think that comes back to that funding piece, right? Like I already said, education is the second largest block of funding that we have in the state budget, only behind healthcare. We need to make sure that we are continuing to fund education. We need to make sure that we are getting those dollars to the local school boards and entities that need those dollars, so that they can use those dollars not only to support current teachers, but to attract new ones. Primarily, what we're doing right now is we're funding education at a rate that only covers the inflationary costs. So we need to make sure that that's the best things for our students and our teachers. I believe that with the surplus that we have, and with the 1 cent penny increase that the governor is proposing right now, we may be able to support those teachers at an even better rate than we currently are.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Tim, I'll reread the question. Schools across Iowa are experiencing a shortage of teachers, as well as other professionals across industries. How can Iowa better position itself to educate, recruit, and retain professionals in high-demand jobs?
Yeah, I think the key is educate, recruit, and retain. So when I ran in 2018, one thing that you heard a lot of the Democrats say at that time was, Republicans were looking to maybe privatize IPERS or get rid of IPERS altogether and go to a private program. And so I always felt like in the midst of the repeal of Chapter 20, when I was out knocking on doors, people wanted to talk about those things. And I felt like IPERS is the single greatest hiring, recruiting, and retention tool that the state has. And so I think continuing to support that. It's like 84% funded right now. That's something that we need to build on. I also think that we need to work with our colleges and universities in promoting our education in Iowa, maybe even looking at some loan forgiveness programs. I know they have some of those in some disadvantaged school districts where there's some disproportionality going on. I believe Burlington, I don't know if they still participate in it. I know they did at one time. West Liberty was another district that I had worked in at one time that forgave the loans as well. And so continuing to provide incentives for some of our best people that are going into college and coming out of it We have put in, I believe Republicans have put in about $400 million new dollars in the last 8 years. And so, I think that they're adequately funding. You hear that all the time, but nobody can ever put a dollar amount or justify what adequate means. So, I think the 30 seconds. Okay. So, that's tough to watch this on camera and look for Rachel. So I apologize. I'll just end it with that. I feel good.
Thank you, Tim. We'll go ahead to the next question. It has been nearly a decade since Iowans authorized their elected representatives to raise the state sales tax and infuse the proceeds into a wide range of environmental, conservation, natural resources, and outdoor recreational initiatives. If you support funding Iowa's land and water legacy, would you support the funding formula that was in effect when the voters approved the constitutional provision, or would you raise sales tax for a new formula? Why or why not?
Well, I do. Now I believe they call that I will. So I do support that. I'm a big outdoorsman myself. I'm not really sure what the funding formula was 10 years ago. I know that it had to pass through like 2 legislative sessions and then go to the Iowa voters. And so, I guess that's the complexity of having, a Democratic majority pass that initially, the bill. And then when you have Republicans take control, you always have that messy situation. Unfortunately, now that it's part of the government's and the Governor's Invest in Iowa Act, with the pandemic, I don't see it moving forward very much here in the next couple of years. So I would be cautious, with the I believe they were going to put 3/8 of the 1 cent towards the Invest in Iowa, which would have created, I want to say, maybe $400 million towards that I will. So I do believe Iowans want it. I do believe we need to fund it. I just want to make sure that the money's there as we progress through this pandemic and as we recover.
Thank you, Tim. Matt, I'll reread the question. It has been nearly a decade since Iowans authorized their elected representatives to raise the state's sales tax and infuse the proceeds into a wide range of environmental, conservation, natural resources, and outdoor recreational initiatives. If you support funding Iowa's land and water legacy, would you support the funding formula that was in effect when the voters approved the constitutional provision, or would you raise sales tax for a new formula? Why or why not?
So I would support the governor's plan to raise the sales tax in order to recreate the new formula. One of the reasons why, and I've worked with Delta Waterfowl for a number of years. I've supported them both financially, and I served on their board at a period of time a few years back. I'm also an avid hunter and an avid fisherman. I enjoy taking my children out and showing them the outdoors and teaching them what it's like to live in Iowa and be able to access the natural resources we have. One of the reasons why I would support that is because if we don't take the initiative now in order to improve our water quality in the state, we are going to be forced to do that through legislation or lawsuits that could arise out of the fact that states below us are experiencing negative externalities as associated with the water quality issues that we have here in Iowa. If we don't take the initiative today in order to try and improve those water quality issues, then we could get sued and we could then be forced to still go through the process of putting in place the programs and the support for farmers and municipalities in order to improve those water quality issues. Also, as a Burlington City Councilman, one of the things that I've done over the last 3 years is be involved with the initiatives that we've done here in the local, at the municipality level, things from water retention ponds, sewer separation orders, and coming up with a number of different policies in order to improve those nitrogen levels here at the city level.
Thank you, Matt. We'll go on to the next question for you, Matt. It's question number 5. Do you support Medicaid rate increases to mental health, disability service healthcare providers so that they can cover frontline staff hazard pay, overtime, and PPE costs?
No, I wouldn't. I would not support raising the Medicaid rates. What I would support, however, is taking a percentage of that penny sales tax that I've already talked about and reallocating it towards mental health. Mental health, in my opinion, is the highest priority and one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue that we have here in the state of Iowa. What the state did, which is one of the few things that I would disagree with previous Governor Terry Branstad, was when we cut the dollars for mental health and we closed the mental health healthcare facilities in the state, we pushed a lot of those expenses to the local level. Right now, we have Burlington City police officers, we have nurses and corrections officers and firefighters acting as mental health professionals because we don't have those facilities here at the local level, and we don't have them at the state level. So I would be more in favor of taking a percentage of that sales tax penny and reallocating it towards mental health in order to support that.
Thank you, Matt. Same question to Tim. Do you support Medicaid rate increases to mental health, disability service healthcare providers so that they can cover frontline staff hazard pay, overtime, and PPE costs?
No, I would not support the rate increase. And so, again, going back to 2018 when I ran, this was a hot issue, obviously coming off the legislative session of 2017-18 when the governor mandated the privatization of Medicaid, which I think most of us or all of us can agree has been abysmal or an absolute disaster as we know it. So I've talked to healthcare providers out at Great River Medical Center, administrators out there. They have challenges every single day. One of the things that I talk to voters about is, and where I disagreed, like Matt, with the governor when he did his executive order on this. Had this been legislated and had it been debated and gone through the legislature, I don't think it would have passed. And so we knew there was problems in the funding and the funding formulas, but just go ahead and putting it in as an executive order wasn't the right choice. And so we were left with the fallout. Unfortunately, again, with the penny sales tax, I don't think that that's probably going to move forward right now. I know I've been talking with Tom Broker, who sits on the State's Mental Health Commission, and him and I were talking last week, and he said there were about $100 million of money that would have been allocated had this gone through, but he's not counting on that as well. And so, no, I would not support the increase.
Thank you, Tim. We'll go to question number 6, Tim. If elected, you would be a new person to the state Senate. What evidence would you offer that you are prepared to represent the people of this district? How would you respond to critics that may suggest you are not ready?
Yeah, great question. I think I've been preparing for this my whole life, to be honest with you. It wasn't an interest of mine early on in my career. And I've had 3 really varied careers. I've worked with a very diverse group of people. I worked in professional sports for 4 years prior to becoming a teacher and then a school administrator. And then I worked for WW Transport here in town, a local business. And now I work for myself. So, I think that the experiences I've gained over 48 years certainly have prepared me for that. I'll go back to my education experience. We receive criticism, as you know, as president of the school board at one time, you get criticized all the time, and you're only as good as your last decision. And so I would lean on those experiences, and I would lean on the relationships from the people that I built over those, last 20 years of being in town and being a local Southeast Iowa resident. Certainly one that's not going to claim to know every answer, but I'm going to work hard for you to find that answer for you.
Thank you, Tim. Matt, I'll reread the question. If elected, you would be new to the state Senate. Similarly, what evidence would you offer that you are prepared to represent the people of this district? How would you respond to critics that may suggest you are not ready?
Sure. Well, if somebody feels like I'm not necessarily ready, then what I'd like to tell them is that I've been preparing for this for a very, very, very long time. All the way from back to the first time when I signed on the dotted line to join the United States military. One of the reasons I did that is because I wanted to use that experience to prepare me for and give me the leadership skills that I would need to make it through life and be able to provide and give back to my community. Also, just going back to my formal education, I studied public policy, I studied economics. I worked with a number of organizations that oversee municipalities and provide services and ideas and at the state level. Coming back to Burlington, I've been a small business owner since 2013. That alone has given me a significant amount of perspective, what it takes in order to make payroll, making it through the hard times and the good. As a father, that also has given me a number of skills, just what it takes in order to be able to have children in this society and raise them in a way where they're going to be able to contribute to the community, and whether it's sitting down and doing math homework in the evening, or it's teaching them how to be a successful person in this life. So those are things that I think have given me a number of skills. Also, more importantly, my time as a Burlington City Councilman has given me tons of opportunities to dive into problems and programs and initiatives at the local, the state, and the federal level. Just the networking ability alone has been extremely beneficial. Last year, I had an opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C., where I met with the president, and we talked about infrastructure, and I still have those connections today, and I rely on them in order to work through problems that we have here locally.
Thank you, Matt. We'll go on to question number 7, start with you, Matt, and this is the second to last question. So our local law enforcement professionals have repeatedly raised the concern that the penalties for repeated unlawful carry of a firearm are mere slaps on the wrist. Would you support enhancing this penalty under section 724.4, which is dealing with the unlawful carrying of a weapon, to a Class D felony for repeated violations to aid law enforcement in removing illegal weapons from neighborhoods? Why or why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I would. In fact, this is one of the things that I talk about the most when I talk to people about what I want to do when I go to the State House. So in the military, I was a police officer. I know what it feels like to drive around in a squad car and respond to calls and have that level of uncertainty. I grew up in a household where my father was a police officer here locally. My brother right now is a Border Patrol agent in Texas. We speak regularly, and we are constantly talking about the barriers that he has in order to be able to do his job and do it safely. Not only that, but I've also been extremely active here locally with the Burlington Police Department and the Des Moines County Sheriff's Office. And I've also worked with the Iowa State Patrol. Not only have I been involved as president of the Shop of the Cop program, but I've been on a number of ride-alongs with them. I've gone through the community programs here locally in order to learn what their job is like and how we can work to improve it at the city level. And a number of times, the conversations that I've had with them have gone down this path. Right now, it's a Class D felony. If you get arrested, if you're a felon and you get caught with a firearm and you get arrested, you can go to prison for 2 years, and then you get out. And then you have an opportunity then to find yourself with another firearm, and you get arrested, and you're locked up for 2 years or perhaps even less, and then you get out. And that cycle can continue. Well, we're not getting those people off the street. So one of the things that I would do, one of the first things I would do is I would go to Des Moines and I would put together a program where we stair-step those penalties up. The first offense would be that 2-year penalty. However, a second offense would be a 5-year penalty with a minimum of 3 served. A third offense would be a 10-year penalty with a minimum of 8 years served. And then a fourth offense would be a 15-year penalty with a minimum of 12 years served. We need to get these felons off the street, and more importantly, we need to get the guns off the street.
Thank you, Matt. Tim, I'll reread the question for you. Our local law enforcement professionals have repeatedly raised the concern that the penalties for repeated unlawful carry of a firearm are mere slaps on the wrist. Would you support enhancing this penalty under section 724.4, which deals with unlawful carrying of a weapon, to a Class D felony for repeat violations to aid law enforcement in removing illegal weapons from neighborhoods? Why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as you know, the Greater Burlington Partnership formed a task force to change the perception of crime in the Greater Burlington area back in 2018. I think it was in the spring of 18. The task force was comprised of several community leaders, business owners, and local law enforcement representatives, of which I was a part of. And so I began having these initial conversations with then Chief Beard, carried on those conversations with Chief Kramer and Major Grimshaw. And so that was a big concern of mine. I said, hey, what's one piece of legislation, if I get elected when I ran in 2018, that you guys would really like to see, where it really would impact crime and the statistics that you guys are keeping? And so, carrying, the penalty for carrying weapons, that aggravated misdemeanor without a license, is always an aggravated misdemeanor and always an aggravated misdemeanor. And I said, do you guys keep statistics on that? And they said, yeah, I can get those to you. So enhancing this to, something similar to, OWI, where OWI first offense, it's a, serious misdemeanor, and a second offense is an aggravated misdemeanor, and third offense is a Class D felony. And so enhancing those penalties for that certainly would make our data and our community a lot safer. I think in 2018, when I met with Chief Kramer the last time, he had talked about they've been tracking carrying weapons arrests and the shots fired calls. And as the weapons arrest increased, the shot fired call decreased. And so the enhanced penalty would mean we would have a greater impact on the area. So that's something that I've committed to our local law enforcement officials trying to get done if I'm elected up in Des Moines.
Thank you, Tim. We'll go to our last question, number 8. Tim, we'll read this for you first. As a candidate for state office, what are your thoughts about the difficulties with state and local budgets coming in the recovery process from COVID-19? What kind of belt tightening do you expect will be necessary at the state and local level? Well,
thankful to conservative budgeting over the last 4 years when the Republicans took control. I call it the trifecta. I believe I saw information that our rainy day fund takes us out to like 37 days, which is about 9 days greater than the national median on that. And so we do have money in the coffers, but we have to be wise on how we spend that. So moving forward, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Can you ask that question one more time for me?
Sure. So a candidate for state office, what are your thoughts about the difficulties with state and local budgets coming in the recovery process from COVID-19, and what kind of belt tightening do you expect will be necessary at the state and local level?
And that's where I lost my train of thought. So I was thinking back to this, and I believe it was 2010 when the Democrats under Chet Culver put forth the 10% across the board cut. And so Iowans stepped up, at least in education, I know. We stepped up and we made it happen, and we went bare bones. And I think that we may not be to that point yet if we're able to open up the state in certain areas or, in regions here in May. But if we take this into July or August, I could see some type of belt tightening like that for the future. And so it certainly needs to be supported. And being a conservative Republican, it's something that I'll continue to support. And we need to just make sure our priorities of helping Iowans and getting them back on the right track is our main priority.
Thank you, Tim. Matt, I'll read the question for you. As a candidate for state office, what are your thoughts about the difficulties with state and local budgets coming in during the recovery process from COVID-19, and what kind of belt tightening do you expect will be necessary at the state and local level?
Great question, Brian. In fact, of all the questions you've asked, I feel like this is probably, especially at this point in time, one of the most important questions. So first off, we need to make sure that Republicans and Democrats alike are working together in order to work through this process and this problem. We also need to make sure that we don't politicize it. This is not a time to raise taxes and dip into the back pockets of taxpayers. It's also not a time to push those costs down to the municipalities, which are ultimately going to work their way into the back pockets of taxpayers. Luckily, the state is starting off from a great financial standpoint. As Tim already alluded to, Republicans, having the trifecta, have done a great job of creating an amazing fiscal policy, which has given us a $289 million surplus. That surplus is going to come in extremely handy when it comes to making the belt tightening decisions that we need to make. At the end of the day, this problem is going to go away, and we need to make sure that Iowa and Iowans and the policies that we create and the elected officials that we elect are ready to get us back to work and are ready to get the state prepared to move into the future so that we can continue to expand, promote business, and cut taxes where we can.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. We will now go into the closing statements. Each of you will have a 2-minute closing statement, and we will again start with Mr. Goodwin on this.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Beginning April 23rd, with absentee voting and all the way up until the primary election on June 2nd, voters will have the choice of choosing between two Republican candidates to represent their interests in November. I've spent countless hours talking with small business owners, educators, law enforcement, elected officials, and many people just like you and me, citizens of Southeast Iowa, and there is a real fear of the unknown. I believe it's important to elect a leader who has spent his entire career not only building relationships, but fostering those relationships and following up with people when they have questions and concerns. As you know, there are a lot of questions and concerns right now, and having someone with common sense and a respected voice in Des Moines is important to providing answers and easing your fears. Southeast Iowans, I'm willing to be your eyes and your ears and your voice in Des Moines. You will need someone who is willing to work harder for you, smarter for you, and someone who is willing to be the voice of reason for you. Senator Ernst believes I'm that guy, and I believe that I'm that guy too. I would be honored to serve as your state senator. I'm asking for your vote in the June 2nd primary election. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Rinker, you have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
All right, thank you, Brian. And again, I'd also like to say thank you to the partnership for putting this on. And I'd also like to say thank you to everybody at home who's going to take the time to sit down and watch this video. Right now, you've got a great opportunity between two fantastic candidates. I'd also like to say that on April 23rd, we are going to host a virtual town hall where people will have the ability to call in and ask questions, and we're going to take an hour or longer if need be to answer these questions in greater detail. I'd like to encourage everybody or let everybody know to look for the invites in their mailbox very soon. That'll have the phone number and the password for them to be able to access that town hall. I'd also like to encourage people to look at my website, and hopefully that will answer more questions. And if it doesn't, there's actually a link there where they can email us and ask questions that perhaps weren't asked here this evening. At the end of the day, voters are going to have the opportunity to decide between two candidates. I believe that I'm the appropriate candidate to go to the Iowa Senate for a number of reasons. But more importantly, I have a significant amount of leadership experience. And I have served as an elected official here in the city of Burlington for the last 3 years. Prior to that, I served on a number of boards and commissions, like I said, that have given me a significant amount of perspective and helped prepare me for this task. I would look forward to having more dialogue with anybody who would like to have it. And I look forward to campaigning and meeting more of you on the campaign trail over the next couple of months. Thank you very much again, Brian.
Thank you. Again, I want to express appreciation to these gentlemen for being willing to serve in our citizen legislature. I'd also like to thank those listening for your interest in the election process. And finally, please be sure to vote for the candidates of your choice in the primary on Tuesday, June 2nd. Good night.